Welcome to this month's edition of Manatee Glens Report on Manatee Educational Television. I'm Mary Ruiz, your host today and President and CEO of Manatee Glens, a private hospital and outpatient practice specializing in mental health and addictions in the Tampa Bay area. Today's show is entitled In Search of a Happy Childhood. Does every child or adolescent need medication to address attention deficit, hyperactivity, depression, anxiety, or other emotional and behavioral problems? Modern medicine offers new treatments for these childhood disorders, but also new worries for parents. Is it right to give psychiatric medications to a child? Is it safe? Are there other options? On our show today, we'll discuss the challenges of raising a child with emotional and behavioral problems, the treatment options available to parents, and the risks and rewards in the search for a happy childhood. Let's meet our guests now. Welcome to Brandi Wilson. Brandi's a mother of 3 beautiful children. I think they all have freckles?
Yes.
A girl and 2 boys. Ms. Wilson is an advocate who supports child mental health by empowering families through her own experience as a mother. At 10 years old, your daughter Kendall was diagnosed with a general anxiety disorder, and we'll hear more about her story later in the program. Good day to you, Brandi.
Thank you.
I'd also like to welcome Dr. Ranjay Halder. Dr. Halder is a child psychiatrist practicing at Manatee Glens. He specializes in children's mental health and addictions disorders and works with hundreds of families in their search for a happy childhood for their sons and daughters. Thank you, Dr. Halder, for appearing today. Well, Dr. Halder, there are many parents who question whether these so-called childhood mental illnesses really exist. I mean, how could a young person attempt suicide? How won't boys be boys and not be focused and want to run around? Is there any real medical proof that these illnesses exist in childhood?
Well, the answer to that, first of all, is yes. There definitely is proof. One of the things as adults sometimes we forget about is how difficult it is being a child in today's day and age. There are numerous stressors, there's the internet, there's peer pressure, there's drugs. There's a lot of things placing stress on young children today. We know with things like depression and anxiety and ADHD,
which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
There is not only a genetic component, but there is also an environmental component too.
So we might be predisposed through our family history.
Definitely.
And we might also be subject to stressors that could bring problems on.
Exactly. We've done a fair amount of studies in brain imaging scans, and individuals who are depressed, who are anxious, clearly show that. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't mean you can go to your pediatrician and say, is there a blood test, is there a test I can get to see if I have depression or anxiety or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. We really look at the person individually and see how they're handling the situation.
So the actual physical structure of a child's brain will look different under imaging if they're depressed.
That's what the studies have shown.
So
but not the actual structures, it's how they uptake up certain
how the brain is actually functioning.
Exactly.
Well, that makes it sound like a brain disorder then.
Most definitely, yes.
Well, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, as you said, is the most commonly diagnosed condition in childhood. And some feel like the frequency of diagnosis is unwarranted. How can we really know if a child has this condition? And do you agree that it's overdiagnosed?
I would actually say, and this is going to sound almost funny when you hear it, I think it's both overdiagnosed and underdiagnosed at the same time.
Interesting.
There are numerous times that I have young people come in and they've been referred from their pediatrician and they really don't have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. They might have anxiety issues or other things that present with similar symptoms. One of the things that I would tell you, and one of the things I tell families all the time, is it's good to look at how they function in all spheres. As in, you can't just be attention deficit hyperactivity at school, or you can't just have ADHD at church. It doesn't work that way. The individual is going to have difficulties with the hyperactivity and the focus problems in all areas. Now, back to something you had said earlier. Boys will be boys and girls will be girls. The question that I always pose to families is it causing a disruption in their education, in their ability to function in the family? And that's the big thing that you must ask yourself. Is their condition or their situation causing it so they're not learning? They're not learning basic things that they need, not only in terms of education, but also in how to socialize with the person next to them.
Brandi, I see that you're agreeing with that statement. Did you
Yes.
find that was true with Kendall, that she experienced difficulties in all phases?
Yes, at home, at church, at school, with friends, with family. Yes.
Yeah. So a child psychiatrist has to be somewhat of a detective then.
Very much so, very much so.
And needing the help of parents to kind of inform on what's going on.
It's not just parents. A decent, good child psychiatrist is exactly that. An old professor of mine used to say, you must be like Columbo and put on your hat. And you've got to talk to the families. You've got to talk to the schools. You've got to talk to not just the parent that brings them in, but the uncles and grandmothers. You've got to get the whole report, because otherwise you're not getting the whole picture.
And is that because many different problems might present themselves with the same behavior?
Exactly. Exactly.
So you do have to be a detective. Parents do worry about giving medication especially to young children. What are the various treatment options for attention deficit, and how effective are they? And is it reasonable for parents to have these kinds of concerns?
What I would tell you, first of all, is it's absolutely reasonable to have concerns and worries. I'm a parent, and any medicine that goes into my son, I worry the dickens about. It is the first thing that I tell parents is, if you have questions, ask. Use the internet, use every available resource to you, and then let the doctor help explain things. The internet is a beautiful source of information, but there is a lot of misinformation out there, or information that's not clear. Now, to your question about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, it, unlike some of the other disorders of depression and anxiety, the research clearly shows that therapy and behavioral modification can help, but unlike the other ones, unless you have medicine, you're going to hit a ceiling in terms of how well it's going to help. And the reason for that is, and this is kind of a misnomer in the name, the recent research and data clearly shows it's not just a problem with focusing and the hyperactivity, it's also a difficulty holding on to memories.
So it's really hard to study for a test.
It's
impossible.
Can't remember. One of the things that families tell me all the time is, I tell them something, it goes in one ear, out the other. And that's exactly what we know. Our recent studies have shown that children hold on to short-term memory so much softer and less than a typical child who doesn't have problems with attention and focus.
Wow.
And so if you're trying to talk to them and they're watching TV, you're not going to get through to them. All they're hearing is your voice. They're using their eyes and their ears on something else. And there are behavioral techniques.
So the child must really have to struggle
They
going
do.
to school every day, where exactly that kind of memory is what you have to have all day long. It must be exhausting.
It's not only exhausting, it's also extremely depressing and anxiety-provoking for the child.
So now we have 2 or 3 problems, not just one.
On top of that, and sometimes you have to decipher which came first. One of the things that I find very commonly with children who have been suffering from ADHD for a while is they start getting the reputation as the bad child, and they'll define themselves at that. Oh, I'm not good at school, I always get in trouble. And that's not the case at all. They want to try, but when they try, it doesn't work. And when you build up that kind of frustration, if you keep trying and always failing, they're going to give up.
You know, that is so sad. So it seems like there's some risk of not using medication when a child truly has attention deficit.
Exactly.
Hyperactivity
What I always tell families is, first of all, my job as a child psychiatrist is to provide you the options available. I always say, in addition to the medicine, you've got to try behavior modification, and you've got to change the way he learns. I give talks to schools, talk to guidance counselors, how you talk to the child, how they learn. But if you create a ground where they won't learn, don't like school, the chances of them doing well in school and even liking school as the years go by get less and less.
Right. And I imagine when the teenage years hit, now we may be more at risk for other problems?
Exactly, exactly. What we know from countless amounts of data, that an individual who is properly medicated, properly treated, sometimes with medication, sometimes with behavior modification, sometimes both, is far less likely to experiment with drugs. But an ADHD child who does not get treatment either by behavior modification or medication management will be almost 20 to 30 times more likely to experiment with illicit drugs.
So it should be encouraging to parents that these medications are available.
Exactly. One of the common questions I get is, well, am I encouraging drug use later in life? Our data is very clear.
Just
and
the opposite.
Exactly, very robust, exactly the
Great.
opposite.
Well, Brandi, your three beautiful children are delightful and well-adjusted. And did you ever dream that you would be dealing with childhood mental illness? Tell us your story.
Well, no, to answer that question, I did not. Kendall was our firstborn, and from the day she was born, she was bright and beautiful, and all the children, all of our family and the children she, grew up with, their cousins and friends, she was always the center of attention and always joking around and just happy about life, and from the start, we knew that. And about 7 years old is when we started to see it was more signs and symptoms of, we thought it was a health issue, sort of stomach issues, headaches, and
Dr. Halder is
yes,
agreeing with
yes,
you that
right.
that's very common
Yep.
experience.
And so, of course, we took her to our family doctor, and they tried to treat her for that, and it just didn't seem, and it went very quickly. It was from 1 week of stomach aches to headaches to not wanting to visit grandparents, not wanting to go to school, just wanting to really seclude herself into her bedroom. And, me and my husband started really wondering what's going on. So we continued her into school. Like I said, it was 7, so kindergarten she did great. She showed no signs. All the teachers loved her and said she was so well behaved in school. Yeah. And it was first grade, and she started to want to seclude herself, like I said. And the second week into school, she started having a lot of, where I've seen, and he talked about before with genetics, some of our family members do suffer from anxiety, and I started to see signs of that, but I thought, she's 7, how, is this possible?
What could she be worried about?
Right.
Everything's great.
Right,
Yeah.
and so we take her to school, and the moment that we realized that it was, more than just a little child anxiety was she tried to jump out of the van at 35 miles an hour on the way to school. She would have rather jumped out of the van than to go into a first grade classroom. So at that point, we took her out of school, and we did have a big move coming to Florida from Michigan. So we came to Florida, and that is when we, she had a really good year. We kind of worked with, I read a lot of books and got a lot of information, used my resources. And then as she got older, it did, progress, and she started doing the same things. She was losing weight. She was, so we realized this is a problem. So we need to go further behind, after the doctor. And that is when we found Manatee Glens. And they have been wonderful. They got us into family counseling. They brought Kendall into, with a counselor one-on-one. And she actually did, as she's seen her, and we do talk about it before, it was so common to us in the home that we didn't really see how
you
unhealthy.
were used to it.
Yes,
You were
she
used to
was.
it.
And once we came to the counselor, she said, your daughter is very unstable, and we need to get her.
That must have been very hard
It
to
was.
hear.
It was very hard. We did, at the same time, she was starting school in 4th grade. And it was the same thing, trying to jump out of the car, couldn't get her out of the car. I would have to drive every morning to a parking lot and near the school, and my 7-year-old would have to get out of the car and open her car door. At that point, I would have to lock the doors and push Kendall out of the driver or the passenger side. And my 7-year-old would have to close the door, and then I would have to take off. And this was recommended by, to get her, she has to fight this fear. But at that point, I'm putting my 7-year-old in danger. My
You're not feeling
10-year-old,
good about this.
No, and I'm crying the whole way, and parents looking on.
So what happened at Manatee Glens that allowed you to kind of get out of that nightmare?
Well, they offered a program of the day treatment, and which is a school that you attend, and it gets them stable. They're able to see a child psychiatrist. She was able to. She felt welcomed. There were other children there, and they gave us parenting skills and groups that we could attend, which were great for our family. and to teach me and my husband, give us information, because we had no idea what was going on at that point.
Right, right. So Kendall ultimately was diagnosed with a generalized anxiety disorder.
Yes, she has anxiety.
So tell us what's going on today.
Today, she is a healthy, happy child. Manatee Glens day treatment was very, very good for her. And she's a little advocate herself. She likes to tell everybody what she went through and how she's overcome. And thanks to the information that we used and the classes that we went to, and also she is on medication, and that helps her to go through and everyday life. And she's in 5th grade now. She's going into middle school next year.
She plays soccer?
Plays soccer.
Right.
Yep. And she's finding herself, and which is good, and where she can be in life, and she does. She would like to get into this child psychiatrist, to be a child psychiatrist or a counselor of some kind. So she has a passion for it now.
So you got your little girl back.
I did.
That's wonderful. Dr. Hall, how common is anxiety disorder in children?
It's actually very...
Is Kendall's experience unique?
Sadly, it's really not. One of the things that throws parents, and for that matter even pediatricians, off is when you think of someone being anxious or depressed, you see someone crying or worrying. With children, it can present very differently, and very commonly exactly how Kendall. A child isn't always able to express themselves.
They don't have the words for
exactly.
what's going on.
And so if you're keeping that stuff inside of you, it's going to come out. And so they'll get headaches, stomach complaints, and sometimes their body can even produce fevers which will mimic other illnesses. Wow. And it's really the anxiety or the depression. Wow. And to say how common it is, right now for young people between the ages of 15 and 25, suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death. For children between the ages of 5 and 12, it's number 6. Those are staggering statistics. And sadly, even with all the interventions we've tried, that number is going down, but relatively holding steady, because we are doing a better job of finding a lot of our young people. But what I tell all parents is, keep your eyes open, keep your ears open. If you have a question, just ask. If something seems a little funny to you, just ask. The purpose of the pediatrician, the purpose of the child psychiatrist is not to say your son or daughter has to be on medicine. It's to offer you options and look at it from a different point of view. We know that in any intervention, medicine can help, but it's the combination of the medicine plus the therapy plus the family and the school that increases our chances of success.
So Brandi, did you find that to be true in the case of you and your family, that
Yes.
all of those pieces are what worked for you? You know, this must have had a profound effect on you and your husband and your sons. Could you talk a little bit about what the family went through while Kendall was struggling with anxiety?
Well, like I said before, we went from a healthy, happy child to not knowing what was going on. And we did have, you know, the 2 younger boys, and it was very hard for them to watch their child, or their sister go through something, because they didn't understand.
Right, and it's the big sister, so they
yes,
probably looked up to her.
So they did, and you know, we would try that. You have to be an example, you know, try to do the best that you can do and try to fight this feeling you're having. But the stress levels were very high in our home.
And you found family counseling helpful?
Yes, we did, very much. They really showed us how we could be a part of that and to help her in every day.
You know, when you were thinking about approaching Manatee Glens for treatment, were you worried that your daughter might be labeled or stigmatized, or
Absolutely.
was that a concern?
Yeah, because it was in the back of my head, of course, you know, that medicine, I always thought, no, I wouldn't do that. There's other ways, but we did. We tried everything. Right. To do, you know, every natural, just ignoring it, trying to do other things, just therapy. And I did raise that concern and was thankful for the doctors and the resources, and that's what they did. They gave me options and said, we understand your concern. Let's try it this way first. And we did. And then, you know, I started to think, I think that we should try that, and we would try. And they were so gracious and just so wonderful.
So what were you expecting? What was the image in your mind when you first came to Manatee Glens?
Really, when I did the day treatment program, I was very concerned. I actually called and said, what type of children will be there? Not that I want to be that, you know,
a protective mom, but you were a protective mom.
I didn't know, because she wasn't that, but she really was. Yeah. And I wanted to know, and then it was a hospital. And what kind of hospital? And, you know, I've heard people say, well, are they white and dreary and you know, but
Right.
it wasn't. It was bright, and it was a happy place for her. She knew that she was going to get help there, and at first she didn't like it, but then she learned to love it. She
'Cause it
didn't
was
want to leave.
a new school, so that's
Yes,
anxiety
yes,
producing for
right.
kids.
But yes, I was concerned that people would look, but now they see how healthy our family is and how wonderful it is that we did go there.
What have you learned from this experience that you'd like to share with other families who are maybe going through the same kind of
Just,
trying to make a decision about what to do?
just find your resources. Like Doctor said, you know, the internet, yes, that is where I did a lot of my research. And I did talk to a lot of people and what do you think? And you know, but you do have to just sit down with the family, and if you really think that they are not able to function at all their places, and she wasn't at that time, to find help. It's getting on the internet to go to the, you know, the websites. It's making one phone call, and how glad I am that I did make that phone call, and not to be scared, because I was so alone. No one understood me.
Right.
No one understood what my daughter was going through, because you deal with, you know, diabetes or more
People
of health
understand that.
issues.
Yeah.
They understand those, but they didn't understand this. They thought, oh, she has behavioral issues. Oh, she has this, and they didn't want to be concerned with it. And then I found the help that I needed, and I wasn't alone anymore. And I learned so much, and now I just want to help every child out there and give them a voice in this, and you know, to help the parents that there is support out there, and you can get the help if you just look for it.
That's wonderful, and thank you for reaching out to other parents. Dr. Halder, what services are available in this community for kids with all kinds of disorders?
It really depends on the disorder, but the biggest thing I would tell you is you just have to ask. What I tell families all the time when I visit schools or when I go to churches or anything like that and meet and greet and things like that is, it doesn't hurt to come in and ask and say, you know, what's going on here? There have been numerous individuals that I've seen, I'm like, you know, right now, this is a normal developmental process. These are normal things. We don't need to do anything, but maybe see a counselor just so he or she has someone to talk to. One of the most important things I think that was said today was giving a voice. A lot of young people don't believe they have a voice, and it's easy to minimize their concerns and worries because, oh, they're just worried about a boy at school. Oh, they're just worried about this. It's easy to brush that under the rug. But for a young child, that's their entire world. And the resources that are available are, of course, a doctor, of course, therapy. There's group therapy, there's individual therapy, there's specific case management. For some of our people, some of our young children who are even more complex, we have wraparound services where there's counselors at school, there's church support groups, there's youth organizations, there's summer camps, there's equestrian therapy where they can go with a horse. There are so many options available, but you can't get started on any of that unless you ask the question.
So
and that first phone call that she mentioned is
right.
the hardest
Right.
step, but in a lot of ways, it's all just the beginning.
Well, what are the effects on childhood of not treating these disorders, of not asking?
Unfortunately, and this is what I really try to stress to parents, the greatest consequences, back to that statistics that I told you, please take this seriously, because the mildest is they might be a little depressed or sad, but the worst is they could kill themselves.
Right.
It's a huge, huge problem in the United States.
Now, you practice at a children's crisis center at Manatee Glens.
Yes.
And that service is available 24/7 if a
There's
parent
a hospital,
is concerned.
exactly. And if you even can't get to that hospital, take your child to the emergency room. They'll evaluate them, and if they think there's anything going on, they will immediately send them to the hospital to have another evaluation. And if they think they need to stay after that evaluation, there's going to be another one. And there are many stages of help, but you've got to ask that question. Right. You just have to. But even besides the worst case scenario of actually dying, or which is the absolute worst, there's nothing worse than that. But there's the growing up, being depressed, being sad, not being able to live up to your potential.
So much for the happy childhood.
And I think as adults sometimes we do that. We're like, oh, it's just growing pains. But I wouldn't go back for those teenage years for all.
Me neither.
Yeah.
How about you, Brandi?
No.
Well, when should parents rely on their pediatrician versus the child psychiatrist?
What I would tell them is the pediatrician is trying to do a lot in about 15 to 20 minutes. A child psychiatrist is a specialist. Not only have they had extra training, but that's all they see. If you have asthma, don't come see me. I'm not your doctor. But if you have a question, just ask the pediatrician. I get referrals all the time from pediatricians in Orlando, Miami, here. Just ask, and they will say, yeah, let's have a look. They're never going to be afraid to say that. But you've got to ask the question, because sometimes, unfortunately, in that 15 or 20 minutes, the pediatrician isn't able to ask that question because they might not know what's going on.
Right. So we're almost out of time. I really thank you both for being here. Brandi, are there any final words that you'd like to leave with parents who are concerned about their children?
Like I said, just again to reiterate, make the phone call. Use your resources for that, because they're out there.
And the parents are still in control, right?
Yes.
Every decision
Always.
is a
Yes.
unique
Always.
decision.
Yes.
A
Always.
step to make a call or to see
Yes.
a doctor is not necessarily a foregone decision about what treatment you're
Exactly.
going to
Right.
feel is right for your child.
Exactly.
So. Well, thank you both, Brandi and Dr. Halder, for appearing on the show. We've heard today that childhood mental illnesses are real medical disorders with an effective range of treatments. Failing to identify and treat these disorders can have a lifetime of impact. Fortunately for our community, there are many affordable treatment alternatives available so that we can have the help in our search as parents for providing a happy childhood. For more information, parents can go to www.manateeglens.org. That concludes this edition of the Manatee Glens Report. This is Mary Ruiz. Thank you for watching today on METV, where you can learn something new every day.